you set a maximum message size, when they try and do that, they'll get a message back from the server saying, no, 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 that's too big. Okay. So you have to decide what that's going to be, what you want to handle, and then how much people can store. Not in transit, but just generally. How many messages are or will be sent per day? So that's not the message itself, but the number of messages, right? So what's your total traffic? What's the average message size if the system's already in place? So if you're doing an upgrade, you can gather that information. What's the number of clients currently? And then very importantly, what are you predicting to need? So when they say, um, don't guess, as soon as you're predicting growth, you're guessing, right? So do understand that you have to guess, but you want to be as close as you can, and if you're going to make a mistake, you want to have bought more hardware than you need. Okay. You can never, like, you'll be fine if you have extra hardware. Honestly, it's you can always find a use for it. Okay. So, sizing exchange, the general approach, step one, gather the data. So, you can query, if you're running Exchange already, an older version, you can query mailbox statistics, and we'll actually do that in some of our assignments. Um, and then calculate the requirements so you can use the client and the server bandwidth calculators. Okay. It's the server is not just bandwidth; it's all actually what kind of hardware you need, really. Now, there's an article that breaks down. They talk about 2016. They never published a 2019 version, but it's still relevant for 2019. And from what I've read, they've actively said that they're like, we haven't updated it because it's still good. Yeah. But this guy, he actually talks about where some of the ideas came from around this calculator. Okay, so once you've decided on your environment, how many servers you're going to deploy, how it's going to be set up, you prepare the environment for introducing Exchange 2019. You got to worry about hardware requirements on your servers, OS requirements, and storage requirements. Okay, so the OS, it does when you're installing Exchange 2019, you want Server 2019. Don't try and run it on Server 2016. Don't try and run it on Server 2022. Okay, that's not really supported. Um, Eventually, like for example, 2019 was not supported on 2016. Eventually, no, I'm sorry, 2013. 2013 was not supported on Server 2016. Eventually, with a service like a service pack update, they did provide support for Exchange for Windows Server 2016. But it's from experience, just with this class, um, I find that if you step even a little bit outside of those support suggestions, you're probably going to regret it. I've seen students like, oh, can I just run 2012 because I have a server that I could use, blah, blah, blah. And then it's terrible, right? And then they have to roll back and start doing it all over again. So keep that in mind. Hardware requirements. Turns out Microsoft kind of lies about this quite a bit. So the minimum hardware requirements for RAM for Server 29 Exchange 2019 is 128 gigs. Um, but we're able to run a very basic system on 8. That difference is enormous. So that tells me that the only reason that they really put that value there is because they wanted people to go to online exchange. uh, you could run with 64 gigs. I'm sure it would work perfectly fine. It would hum, purr like a kitten. Um, but so you got to eyeball it. But if you're stepping outside of their hardware requirements, you're gonna have some support issues in terms of them saying, well, you need more RAM. Um, Now when it comes to their storage, you want to take them seriously. They're not messing around. Okay, you cannot run this on simple spindle drives. Okay, even if you're setting up a RAID array. SAS is supported, but something like a 5400 RPM drive, that you're not going to be able to get away with, okay, even in a RAID configuration. It does support things like SANs, the use of iSCSI, network attached storage, all those kind of more exotic storage options, right? However, those solutions have to support block level writing. So Exchange itself wants direct access to the storage, okay? They don't want to have to go through some intermediate. RAID is supported, and your databases can go up to 2 terabytes in Exchange 2019. Which is, if you exceed that, you can always just create another database. You can have as many of those as you really want. Okay, some things you need in your environment, which we had just setting up our simple environment, right? You need a schema master. This is a role within, it's a legacy role within Active Directory. Because we only have a single server, every role was given to that server, okay? If you're in an environment with multiple servers, one of them is going to be the schema master, okay? But you have to figure out which one it is, and you have to make sure that they're together in the same environment, okay? So when you're doing your installation, you want to do it with an account that's a member of Enterprise Admins. You have to have a global catalog server in each site where you plan to install Exchange. Okay, so assuming that you're going to install more than one server, you want to check that there's a global catalog server in the site that you're putting each Exchange server. That means that if you're running a read-only domain controller, for example, that does not run a global catalog service. And so you can't run, like they don't play nicely together, a read-only DC and an Exchange server on one site unless there's another DC which can act as the global catalog server. Okay, and it's got to be writable. You can't work with a read-only because Exchange wants to make changes, and if it can't do it, it's going to throw up on you. Okay, so just a few things to keep in mind. I'm not sure what your um, I'm not sure what your capstone is going to look like this term, because I know Sammy's messing around with it a little bit. He's trying a few different things, but I know in the past students had been trying to set up Exchange on in an environment with a read-only domain controller, and I was just like, no, that's not going to work. Okay, they've been trying for a little while, and they kind of forgot about this little thing. But these are things that you want to check. Okay. Just make sure your DNS environment is healthy. And that means that you can forward and reverse look up each of your important hosts. Sometimes it matters with the client, not usually, but it is possible that you can get misbehavior because even a client is not resolving in DNS. But I wouldn't say that's a major issue. But on the server side, you want to make sure everything's working well. You want to make sure that AD and DNS replication are functioning between different sites. Okay. Now, in terms of firewall requirements, really, we're going to be playing with that a lot in this course in Lab 1. It's not really a problem typically. The ports that need to be open for Exchange are pretty predictable and understandable. So you shouldn't have major issues with firewall requirements. Just make sure that your clients are configured, not your clients, but your member servers are configured appropriately so that the right ports are open. And then if you have any intermediate firewalls like routers and things like that, make sure that those also have some holes punched through. Okay. So if you're in a big environment where you have a network team, you want to get them involved, the security team too, so that you understand what you're able to do, what they can do for you, and if all of that's going to work okay. In especially the Edge server, if you install it, it needs to be installed in a demilitarized zone. There's probably one already in the environment, but then you have to make sure that all the communication gets through. That's something we'll be dealing with in Lab 1. Okay. Now, integration with other apps and services, we're not really going to mess with that too much, but it is something that comes up a lot out in the real world, you know. So you might already have an SMTP gateway to deal with the outside world. You might have your own anti-spam malware, some kind of AV appliance that you're using, Cisco unified messaging, for example, so voicemail. All of those should be able to integrate with Exchange, but some of them will be easier than other ones. It's worthy of research, right? SharePoint as well. In online Exchange, they're just integrated. On premises, it's a little more complicated, right? Backup and restore is a topic on its own, but backups in Exchange do have certain requirements, which not all backup solutions are able to perform. You have to be able to uh, leverage VSS, which is volume shadow copy services. Okay. Exchange, basically, you have an active database which is constantly being used. And what you can do with VSS is you can kind of freeze it for a while, lock it, take a backup. But even while you're locking it, Exchange is still able to function. It's just not committing anything to the databases that you're backing up. Okay. And then it has to play catch up later. So that integration is really important when you want to have, you don't want to have any downtime. Um, but not all backup services are equal, and so some of them can't do that. So if you have a backup service, you want to check on that. If you're getting one, you want to make sure it supports it. Okay, and then any other third-party applications you don't worry about. Okay, so the whole process is a lot messier in the outside world. You should really do a lot of testing. That's the ins and the outs of it before you go live. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. So anybody who has a personal, like an individual question, stick around. And the rest of you, if you're doing good and you're getting your assignment is all going fine, then have a good rest of your work block. And I'll let you go. But for those of you who are stuck on something, just stick around and we can talk it out. Okay. Otherwise.